Carried in the second group of ships would launch an amphibious landing. The only way to win back the Falklands would be to have troops fighting on the ground there.
As the fleet sailed south, United Nations and US diplomats tried for a peaceful settlement. But by April the 30th, any hope of a diplomatic solution evaporated. Neither side would back down.
Neither Britain nor Argentina had officially declared war, but now war seemed inevitable.
The Argentinian garrison of these islands watched the British military response to their invasion with growing concern. The race was now on to get organised and resupplied before the British arrived. The Argentinian army did have some professional soldiers, but the majority of its men were young conscripts. To strengthen its forces, the army recalled reservists, more experienced men who could stiffen the ranks of those who'd just begun their military service.
My commanding officer came on the radio at 4 o'clock in the morning and told me to wake up all the men. We had to be in the Malvinas in 36 hours. You could see that the soldiers felt very proud.
By the end of April, there were 13,000 Argentinian troops on the islands, and with them, their new commander.
The man in charge was Brigadier General Mario Menendez. Menendez was a tough soldier who'd made his name fighting rebels in remote parts of Argentina. He was quickly sworn in as the new governor of the Falklands. His first task was to prepare his defences.
Strategically, Menendez's position was strong. As you can see, the Falkland Islands are about 400 miles from Argentina. That put the islands just within range of Argentina's air force based on the mainland.
The main two islands are West and East Falkland, each around 50 miles from end to end. Menendez positioned 2,000 of his men on West Falkland, 1,000 men here at Goose Green, and about 10,000 in the hills to the west of Stanley. These hills were the Argentinians' last line of defense. But Menendez hoped his ground troops wouldn't have to fight at all. He planned to neutralize the British task force out at sea before they had a chance to set foot on land.
The Argentinian Air Force was well trained and could launch high-performance fighter bombers from bases on the mainland. These aircraft could attack the task force once they were within range. Against this force, the British could only take as many fighters as they could fit onto their two aircraft carriers. That was just 34 planes. 34 against nearly 100 Argentinian fighters. This small force was supposed to gain air superiority, protect the British fleet, and prepare the way for the amphibious landings. All this from the confined flight decks of the two carriers as they ploughed through the heaving South Atlantic seas. It was an enormous challenge. On the 1st of May 1982, the Battle for the Falklands began. The first clash between Britain and Argentina was in the air. But despite being the underdog, the British immediately showed they were a force to be reckoned with. There was one thing that the Argentinians hadn't expected. Britain's latest acquisition, the Sea Harrier. God, you can feel the power of that thing, it's unbelievable! That's what's required to get it off this tiny deck. Whoa! This aircraft was brand new, untested in combat when it was sent to the Falklands. Unique in its ability to take off and land vertically and operate from short runways, the Harrier quickly proved it was versatile and extremely reliable. And the Harrier had another killer advantage. It was armed with the latest air-to-air heat-seeking missile called Sidewinder. 4 Argentinian aircraft were shot down on the first day by Sidewinder. Another 15 would follow. The British seemed to be smashing the Argentinian Air Force, but they could only maintain their advantage in the air while their ships below remained safe.
The most important ships in any naval task force are the aircraft carriers. If the carriers are lost, so too are their vital aircraft. The 2 aircraft carriers in the Falklands had to be protected at all costs, and although the action continued in the skies, the focus of the battle shifted to the rough seas of the South Atlantic.
On the 1st of May, Woodward's main task force was 100 miles northeast of the Falklands. The British government had declared a 200-mile exclusion zone around the islands and said it would attack anyone entering it. Up here to the northwest, a cluster of Argentinian warships was approaching. Among them, the Argentinian flagship, the aircraft carrier the Viernes de Mayo.
She carried aircraft that would soon be within close range of the British fleet. But even more menacing, the British reckoned, was another group of ships to the south of the Falklands. A cruiser, the General Belgrano, and 2 destroyers, which the British believed were armed with lethal Exocet missiles. These missiles could sink the British aircraft carriers if they got within range. The Royal Navy could not afford to risk an Exocet attack on its vital carriers. The loss of even one carrier and her combat aircraft could mean defeat. Without both, the British task force would have to withdraw from the fight completely. The Argentinians appeared to be threatening a pincer movement against the British fleet. The carrier, the Viernes de Mayo, from the north, and the Belgrano group from the south. The Belgrano group was being tracked by a submerged British submarine, the Conqueror. Conqueror's captain feared that if the Belgrano turned north, it would move into these shallow waters. The Conqueror would struggle to track the ship in the shallow water and risk losing sight of it.
The Belgrano might then head for the British fleet and put the task force in grave danger.
Beneath the waves, Conqueror's commanding officer saw that the Belgrano was steering an erratic course just outside the exclusion zone. The situation was so critical that the Prime Minister herself was consulted. She gave the order to attack. The Conqueror launched its torpedoes.
There were masses of injured men. Most of them had been burnt, and they remained covered in oil. When I got to my life raft, I asked a sailor to come with me again and look for the people that were missing, including the commander.
Within 45 minutes, the Belgrano had sunk. Immediately, the entire Argentinian Navy, fearful of further submarine attacks, turned round and headed home. The British had scored a huge military success, and Galtieri's plan seemed to be faltering. But he was still able to unleash the weapon the British feared most. The Argentinians had recently bought 5 air-launched Exocets. These half-ton missiles could seek out and destroy a ship from over 30 miles away. On the morning of the 4th of May, 2 Argentinian strike aircraft, each armed with an Exocet, took off from the mainland.
On that particular day in 1982, Woodward posted 3 ships like this as his front line of defence. They were destroyers: HMS Coventry, HMS Glasgow and HMS Sheffield. They were armed with anti-aircraft missiles. These ships could shoot down aircraft, but they were unreliable against low-altitude targets like Exocets.
That morning, things had been relatively quiet for the British task force.
This is Alpha Whiskey Weapons Free, Baker 5017, a strength 2.
Then, just before 2 o'clock, the Argentinian aircraft were picked up by the radar room on board HMS Glasgow. Glasgow immediately sent an urgent warning to all the other ships and went to full action stations herself.
Break! They're going atop the ship.
Reminder the command A remains to coordinate and fire full steadfast.
But 20 miles away, on board HMS Sheffield, the scene couldn't have been more different.
Here, the ops room wasn't fully manned.
Bueno, no sé si ustedes prestaron atención, pero ¿se acuerdan lo que yo les contaba? ¿Por qué habían hundido al general Belgrano? Bueno, porque ellos consideraban que los 5 Exocet estaban arriba del general Belgrano, y como lo explicaba el periodista británico, era una amenaza para la flota británica, porque con esos Exocet se podían haber hundido los 2 portaaviones. Bueno, con esos Exocet, en lugar de hundir el portaaviones, entre otras cosas, aparte de hundir un buque de guerra, se hundió un portacontenedores, que en realidad fue más perjudicial para ellos que si le hubieran hundido el mismo portaaviones, porque ese portacontenedores tenía ropa, comida, municiones y sobre todo agua potable. Iba en ese portacontenedores, y ese portacontenedores los argentinos se lo hundieron. La segunda parte de este video la vamos a ver la semana que viene, pero ustedes prestaron atención a las maquetas que mostraban y las distancias que contaban. Bueno, los ingleses se contaron 2 o 3 cositas que no son reales. Ellos mandaron 15.000 hombres, pero nosotros en Malvinas teníamos 10.000, no 13.000 como dicen ellos. Nos vemos la semana que viene y me despido como lo hago toda la semana, con la frase que decía el coronel Zeneldín: Dios y patria o muerte. Chao, hasta la semana que viene.
Entre los mares, en las noches ves fantasmas que muerden el pabellón. En las aguas bajo el frío duerme. ¿Quién guardará tu plegaria del viento? ¿Quién borrará nuestras lágrimas del mar? Siento al dormir tus muletas en llamas y en sueños volverás a caminar. Casi sin esperarlo, en el diario de hoy, la manifestación y tu foto en alto, la bandera entre tus manos. Hoy después de la tormenta, las luces no brillarán en las aguas bajo